don't know what NFTs
No,
are.
I know what they are, I don't have any.
Jonas Odenheimer directs and writes NFT Cursed Images, and this is a very modern haunted crypto movie, I guess you want to say. Okay, so those of you who are interested in modern kind of tech trends, online trends and things like this, cryptocurrency, this one might be for you. It's a little bit like The Ring in a way, is the kind of the short way to describe this. We have a group of 7 friends in London, most of whom are somewhat successful, and they're, you know, having a few beers in one of their apartments one evening, and they're discussing NFTs along with kind of cryptocurrency and such. And one of them mysteriously ends up being sent 7 NFTs from this kind of apparently kind of like haunted curse, which has been, you know, talked about on Reddit and such, where there's 666 images that randomly get sent out to people, and they're apparently really cursed. So each one of these friends ends up with one, and it's kind of like each one has like a unique image of kind of like a kind of some type of horror iconography, for example. So we cut to later on that evening, and each one of these friends seems to be harassed by what appears to be the manifestation of whatever their NFT depicted, and each one is kind of unique. And as the movie goes on, obviously we learn a little bit about more how maybe these things have kind of come to be and how these kind of friends might deal with them. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So yes, a very modern movie, and I think obviously because of this, it kind of stands out as being somewhat unique, which is the first thing I'll say in the kind of the positives here. I will say it's having movies like this will probably, you know, freeze it in a moment in time. So you know, it's a little bit like how in Transformers, Soundwave's cassette tape recorder is not really relevant anymore. And I suspect maybe this movie might be little bit like that in the future. But for now, it is quite a modern, you know, a modern kind of movie. And I think these advances in technology, you know, really open up some kind of new doors for potential kind of horror subject matter. Now, I'm not going to profess to know much about NFTs, to be honest with you. I've obviously heard it. I know broadly what they are. But I really don't know. I didn't really even know that people traded them, if I'm completely honest. So the movie actually does try and do a little bit of work in trying to explain about what they are. One of the kind of the members of the group doesn't really know much about them, so it basically provides to have some exposition about what NFTs are. So if you're not overly familiar, the movie does try and do the work in giving you some, at least broad idea about maybe what they are. But, you know, it would help if you have at least some idea about crypto and things like that to give you a kind of a broad idea at least to start from. So we have this, and then the movie, as I say, kind of plays out a little bit like The Ring. So again, if you're a fan of The Ring, you know, each one of these people are now cursed, and they have a variety of different, antagonists that will turn up. It even reminded me, I guess it's a cross between The Ring and 13 Ghosts, because these ghosts are kind of all quite unique. So it kind of reminded me of that as well to a degree. So The Ring meets 13 Ghosts is maybe the log line for this, I would say. But each one of these kind of ghosts or demons or whatever they are, you know, I got to say I really quite enjoyed the visuals. I mean, they look pretty cool, and they're obviously all kind of different. So you have a little bit of variety here, a little bit like 13 Ghosts. So that was quite fun, and they're quite kind of freaky looking. They're kind of like distorted sort of humans. And, you know, even that's kind of more freaky looking than maybe an out-and-out monster in some respects, because it's like, it's sort of recognisable as a person, but it's like when you go into a House of Mirrors and you see these kind of distorted visions, it's kind of like that. So I actually kind of quite dug the designs here of these kind of creatures, or whatever you want to call them, these spirits, whatever they are. So that I quite enjoyed. And, you know, the movie leans into the technology. For example, one of the guys starts to cotton on about what's happening and uses like uses the internet to try and find ways to try and maybe fight back. And again, it keeps it in the theme with using technology, having these kind of creatures that are born of technology being fooled by technology. So like that I kind of quite liked. I think the movie's kind of quite well filmed. To be honest with you, it's reasonably well put together. I mean, it's nothing flashy. I wouldn't say there's any kind of really stylistic directorial flourishes, but it's certainly kind of like put together in a way that I think seems proficient. I think the acting is for the most part pretty solid. I think these characters do seem like a kind of a bunch of modern friends that you kind of might see in kind of like sort of West End London and things like that. So it kind of did capture that sort of somewhat kind of yuppie experience to a degree. I mean, you could argue maybe it makes the characters a little unlikable to a point, but I didn't think they came across as particularly kind of unlikable and anything like that. But I think, the acting, the character work here was all kind of fine for this sort of, lower budget kind of horror movie here. Nothing outstanding by any means, but good enough, I would suggest to you. The story's also quite short. It only runs about, I think, 74 minutes. So it's a really punchy film. So the pace of the movie is pretty tight, so you never really feel it drags at any point. And it does kind of get started pretty quickly. So I have to say I kind of quite enjoyed the pace of this movie. And it's not long before our protagonists start kind of getting visits from these kind of creatures. And, so it is really sort of... feels like you really don't have the time to kind of like prepare or anything like that. And some of these, as I say, these scares are quite well staged. So let's talk about what doesn't work, and let's talk about dialogue and exposition. So this movie has a lot of both. Now I understand the need for something like a lot of exposition where you have a subject like NFTs where not everyone is going to know. So the movie does admittedly do the work in kind of trying to establish to those of you who maybe are unfamiliar, like myself, with really what an NFT is. But at the same time, on a storytelling perspective, the movie sort of has these moments where it sort of stops and we have these kind of like exposition dumps, and it does feel a little bit unnatural, particularly when we're meant to believe that these people are drinking on a kind of a night out, and then we're having to explain what NFTs are and things like this. I mean, I suppose they did the best they can, but you can't help but feel that kind of the movie's dialogue is a little bit too sort of, exposition type dialogue. The other thing as well, in staying with the dialogue, this movie relies a lot on people talking on the phone to one another. Throughout the movie, our characters leave this party and go to various places within London, and they communicate with each other via phone. So this probably the most. If you were to pause this movie randomly at any point, I pretty much wager you'd land on someone talking on the phone, because this movie, the vast, I would say, likelihood is that the most screen time is people talking on the phones, and it ends up, even though this movie is relatively short, I think it could have done with a little bit less of that, to be honest, and maybe have people together a little bit more, because you do feel there's just a lot of dialogue on phones. And again, some of the dialogue, it's a little bit kind of like exposition heavy at times. So, the script is sort of serviceable, but I wouldn't exactly say it's sort of shining. It kind of feels like a little bit sort of maybe unnatural in some of the kind of the way this dialogue kind of presents itself. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of our creatures, to be honest. I mean, I kind of understand the reason why we only really see very short kind of clips of them, because they want to have that impact. And I guess it is effective in that manner, but I do feel like I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, and also seen a little bit of the actual kills, because what the movie does is it kind of shows you like people reacting to, there's some type of creature that is just about to attack me, and then it cuts. And then later on you'll see like the dead body and stuff. So it's kind of like, it would have been interesting to see at least one attack on screen. What are these things actually doing to kill these characters? And again, maybe it's a budgetary issue, but I think the movie, it kind of has these creepy moments where we see these creatures and, our characters for the first time, you're seeing them kind of reacting, and then it kind of cuts away, and then, you know, later on we learn that this person's dead. And it's like, okay, you can maybe get away with that a couple of times, but I think every time, I think we needed to see a little bit more on screen here, to be honest with you. I think you might feel a little bit shortchanged in regards to horror on screen. So the movie, I think, is a serviceable movie in regards to, as I say, its directorial style, but because it's so modern and obviously has these kind of like these sort of technological elements to it, you would have imagined to have the kind of directorial style be a little bit more cutting edge in a way, and it's fine, you know, it's serviceable, but maybe not sort of anything sort of special. So overall, I think this movie is a watchable movie. I think it's you know, it's somewhat effective. I think, you know, it doesn't really have any major flubs or kind of like elements where I feel it sort of fails. But I think there could have been more to this film. It could have had a little bit more of these attacks of the creatures, and a little bit more kind of, you know, interactions with people in person and things like that. So yeah, it's a decent movie. It's an above average movie, but I wouldn't say it's anything especially you know, extravagant or extraordinary in any kind of way. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. What were your thoughts? Leave me comments, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.